Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Olympus and watched the stars drift past the viewing screen. The deep space exploration vessel had been traveling for 3 months toward the Kepler 442 system, following strange energy readings that Earth Command could not explain. Jake had spent 15 years in space, but he had never seen anything like these signals before. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Communications Officer Lisa Kim sat at her station, monitoring the long-range sensors. Chief Engineer Maria Santos checked the power systems from her console. Dr. Ryan Phillips, the ship's expert on ancient cultures, studied the data on his personal tablet. The crew of 48 people had grown used to the routine of deep space travel, but today felt different. Lisa suddenly straightened in her chair. Her fingers flew across the control panel as new data flooded her screens. The communications array had picked up something unusual, something that made her heart race with excitement and fear. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice tight with tension, "I'm receiving a transmission." Jake turned toward her station. "From where?" "There are no human colonies in this system." "That's just it, sir. The signal is coming from beyond the gas giant. But it's not in any language I recognize. Actually, that's not true. I do recognize parts of it, but that's impossible." Dr. Phillips looked up from his tablet and moved closer to Lisa's station. His specialty was studying how ancient human civilizations had lived and what they believed. He had spent years learning dead languages and forgotten customs. "Can you play it back?" Phillips asked. Lisa nodded and activated the speakers. Strange sounds filled the bridge, a mix of musical tones and spoken words. The voice that came through was deep and powerful, speaking in rhythms that seemed almost like poetry or prayer. Phillips went pale as he listened. His hands shook slightly as he pulled up files on his tablet, comparing what they heard to his database of ancient languages. "This section here," he said, pointing to the audio display. "It's Sanskrit. Very old Sanskrit. And this part is ancient Greek, but listen to this." He highlighted another section. "These sound patterns match Egyptian hieroglyphic pronunciation." Maria Santos left her engineering station and joined them. As the chief engineer, she was more interested in how the signal was being transmitted than what it said. "The transmission is incredibly powerful," she reported. "Whatever is sending this has technology far beyond anything we've built. The signal is coming from the source that should be impossible to hide from our sensors." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. First contact with alien life had always been a possibility during deep space missions, but not like this. Not with signals that used Earth's oldest languages. "What is it saying?" Jake asked Phillips. The archaeologist continued studying his notes, cross-referencing the sounds with his databases. His face grew more troubled with each translation. "It's talking about the returned ones," Phillips said slowly. "It mentions names: Zeus, Odin, Ra. These are gods from Earth's ancient religions. But that's not the strangest part. The message seems to be directed at someone. It says children of Earth and talks about waiting for eons." Lisa's console chimed with new data. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive object behind the gas giant. It just appeared on our sensors, but it's huge. Bigger than anything we've ever built." Jake moved to the main display and watched as the sensor data painted a picture of something incredible. The object was clearly artificial, but its design was unlike any human technology. It seemed to blend different architectural styles, some that looked like ancient temples, others that were purely functional like a space station, and still others that defied easy description. "Take us in for a closer look," Jake ordered. "But keep our weapons ready and maintain a safe distance." The Olympus changed course toward the mysterious object. As they drew closer, more details became visible. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered in patterns that looked both technological and artistic. Lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that seemed almost alive. "Captain," Phillips said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think I understand what we're looking at. In Earth's ancient stories, the gods lived in great palaces in the sky. Mount Olympus, Asgard, the Do-It. What if those weren't just myths? What if they were memories? Before Jake could respond, every screen on the bridge flashed with brilliant light. The ship's systems hummed with energy that seemed to come from nowhere. Then a voice spoke directly into their minds. Bypassing their ears entirely, the voice was warm but impossibly vast, like the sound of stars singing. It spoke in perfect English, but underneath they could hear echoes of every language that had ever existed on Earth. "Children of Earth," the voice said, "we have waited eons for your return to the void. Your ancestors knew us as gods. Now you shall know us as we truly are." The Olympus hung motionless in space before the ancient structure. Jake and his crew stared at their screens, knowing that everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe had just changed. Forever, whatever lay ahead would test not just their courage, but their understanding of what it meant to be human. Fleet Admiral Chris Taylor read Captain Morrison's report for the third time, but the words still seemed impossible. Ancient gods speaking from a massive space station beyond Kepler 442 was not the kind of first contact scenario that Terran Command had prepared for. The report sat on his desk marked with the highest security classification, and only 12 people in the entire Earth government had clearance to read it. Chris activated his secure communication system and sent an immediate message to Dr. Amy Watson, Earth's leading expert on comparative mythology. Within hours, she was aboard the fastest ship in the fleet, the battlecruiser Mjolnir, commanded by Captain Steve Parker. The ship's mission was officially listed as a routine patrol, but everyone involved knew they were heading toward the most important moment in human history. Dr. Watson spent the journey studying every piece of data that the Olympus had transmitted. As an expert who had spent her career comparing the myths and legends of different Earth cultures, she recognized patterns that others might miss. The signal translations that Dr. Phillips had provided showed remarkable consistency with stories from civilizations that had never contacted each other. "Captain Parker," she said during one of their planning meetings, "what if our ancestors weren't creating myths about imaginary beings? What if they were trying to remember real encounters with advanced beings who called themselves gods?" Steve Parker was a practical man who had commanded warships for 20 years. The idea of ancient astronauts visiting Earth seemed like science fiction to him, but the evidence from the Olympus was impossible to ignore. "If that's true," he replied, "then we're about to meet our own ancestors. The question is whether they'll be happy to see us." The Mjolnir reached the Kepler 442 system 2 weeks after receiving the initial report. Captain Morrison's ship was still maintaining its position near the massive structure, which had remained silent since its first communication. As the Mjolnir approached, both ships detected movement from the ancient station. Docking bays that had been invisible before suddenly opened along the station's hull. The bays were enormous, large enough to accommodate ships far bigger than anything humans had ever built. Lights began pulsing in welcoming patterns, and the same voice that had spoken to the Olympus crew now addressed both ships. "Welcome, distant children. Come aboard and learn of your heritage among the stars." Captain Morrison led the first contact team, which included Dr. Watson, Dr. Phillips, and 6 security officers. Captain Parker remained aboard the Mjolnir with weapons ready, prepared to evacuate the team if anything went wrong. The docking bay they entered was breathtaking in its scale and beauty. The walls seemed to be made of metal that flowed like liquid, constantly shifting in patterns that were both geometric and organic. The artificial gravity felt perfect, exactly like Earth normal, and the air was clean and warm. 3 figures waited for them at the far end of the bay. They were humanoid, but clearly not baseline human. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall, with proportions that seemed mathematically perfect. Their skin had a subtle luminescence, and their eyes held depths that suggested vast intelligence and experience. The central figure stepped forward. He wore robes that seemed to be cut from starlight itself, and when he moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around him. "I am called Allfather in your tongue," he said, his voice resonating with harmonics that touched something deep in the human mind, though my true name would damage your vocal cords to speak. "These are my companions, whom you might recognize as Athena and Thor from your ancient stories. Dr. Watson found herself staring at beings she had studied in books her entire career. The figure claiming to be Athena had the bearing of someone who had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. The one called Thor radiated strength that seemed to warp the air around him. "You're really them," she whispered, "the gods from our myths." "Not gods," Allfather corrected gently. "Merely what humanity becomes when given enough time and proper guidance. We are your descendants, returned from a journey that began millions of your years ago." Dr. Phillips stepped forward, his archaeological training overcoming his shock. "You're saying you're humans? From Earth?" "We were human once," Athena replied, her voice carrying the weight of eons. "When Earth was young and your species was taking its first steps toward civilization, we were among you. But we grew beyond the limitations of baseline humanity. We learned to reshape matter, to transcend physical death, to travel between stars as easily as you walk between rooms." Thor's expression was less gentle than his companions. "We left Earth to explore the galaxy and found it full of wonders and horrors. We built a great civilization among the stars, but in doing so, we lost something precious. We lost our connection to what we had been." Allfather gestured toward the vast chamber around them. "This station and others like it were built as waypoints, places where we could rest during our long journey through the cosmos. But we have been waiting here for a specific purpose. We have been waiting for our parent species to join us among the stars." "Why?" Captain Morrison asked. "Why wait for us?" "Because," Athena said sadly, "we discovered that transcendence without connection leads to emptiness. We became powerful beyond measure, but we forgot how to feel wonder. We forgot how to dream. We forgot what it meant to be human." "The galaxy is not an empty place," Thor added, his voice growing darker. "There are other species, other civilizations. Many of them see younger races as threats to be eliminated. They have been watching your species' expansion into space, and they are not pleased." Dr. Watson felt a chill of fear. "Are we in danger?" "Your species stands at a crossroads," Allfather explained. "You can remain as you are and face the hostility of elder races who will not tolerate your growth. You can accept our guidance and begin the process of transcendence, becoming something greater than human but risking the loss of your essential nature, or you can find a third path, one that we never discovered." "What happens if we choose wrong?" Morrison asked. "If you remain unchanged, you will likely face extinction within a few generations," Thor said bluntly. "The elder races have destroyed dozens of promising species. If you accept transformation without wisdom, you may become like us, powerful but hollow." "And the third path?" Dr. Watson asked. Athena smiled, and for a moment her ancient features showed a glimmer of the hope that had driven humanity to reach for the stars. "That," she said, "is what we are hoping you will show us." The revelations aboard the ancient station had shaken everyone involved. But the true scope of humanity's situation became clear only when Allfather activated the station's main viewing chamber. The walls became transparent, revealing not empty space but a vast network of lights stretching across the galaxy. Each light represented a world controlled by the hegemony, the coalition of elder races that dominated galactic civilization. Dr. Kevin Hughes, a geneticist who had joined the second wave of researchers, studied the biological data that the returned gods had shared. The results were disturbing and fascinating in equal measure. The beings they had met were indeed human in origin, but they had been modified at the genetic level in ways that pushed the boundaries of what could still be called the same species. "They've essentially become living gods," Kevin explained to the assembled team. "Their cellular structure has been enhanced to the point where they can manipulate matter at the molecular level. They don't age, they can survive in vacuum, and their minds process information thousands of times faster than baseline humans. But they're still recognizably human," Dr. Watson pointed out. "They think like us? They respond to the same basic emotional triggers?" "Yes," Kevin agreed, "but according to their genetic scans, the transformation process is irreversible. Once you begin the enhancement process, you can never go back to being fully human." While the scientists debated the implications of transcendence, Commander Lisa Rodriguez prepared for a diplomatic mission that could determine humanity's fate. The hegemony had agreed to meet with human representatives, but their message had been clear: humanity would explain their expansion into galactic space or face the consequences. The U's Valkyrie, commanded by Rodriguez, was humanity's most advanced diplomatic vessel. It carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems, but it was equipped with every communication protocol and cultural database that Earth had developed. The ship's destination was Nexus Prime, the political center of the hegemony located in the galactic core. The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 weeks, even with the enhanced drive systems that the returned gods had provided. During that time, Rodriguez and her team studied everything they could about the elder races. The information was limited, but it painted a picture of civilizations so old and alien that communication would be challenging. The architects were crystalline beings who thought in geological timescales and saw organic life as a temporary inconvenience. The Swarm Queens controlled vast networks of smaller creatures and made decisions through biological consensus among millions of minds. The Void Touched were energy beings who had transcended physical form entirely and viewed matter-based life as primitive. When the Valkyrie reached Nexus Prime, Rodriguez was stunned by what she saw. The station was larger than Earth's moon and composed of materials that seemed to shift between states of matter. Ships from dozens of different species docked at ports that adapted their configuration to match each vessel's requirements. The meeting chamber was a vast sphere, where delegates from different species could exist in their preferred environments. The architects sat in a section filled with crushing pressure and toxic gases. The Swarm Queens occupied a humid, organic space that pulsed with living tissue. The Void Touched manifested as shifting patterns of light in a zero-gravity field. Rodriguez and her team sat in a small section with Earth-normal atmosphere, feeling very small and very young compared to the ancient beings around them. The architect spokesperson was a towering crystal formation that spoke by resonating at frequencies that the translation system converted to words. The species calling itself humanity has begun expanding beyond its system of origin. This expansion violates the compact of stability that has maintained galactic peace for 3 million years. We weren't aware of any compact, Rodriguez replied carefully. Humanity has been alone in space as far as we knew. We're exploring and settling new worlds because that's what our species does. The Swarm Queen delegate was a writhing mass of interconnected creatures that spoke with 1,000 voices. Ignorance is not a defense. Young species always believe they are alone because they lack the wisdom to detect the presence of their betters. Your expansion must cease immediately. Rodriguez felt her temper rise but kept her voice diplomatic. Our species has a right to grow and explore. We're not threatening anyone or interfering with other civilizations. The Void Touched representative manifested as a pattern of shifting colors that somehow conveyed immense condescension. Young species always make the same claims. You promise peace while your very existence disrupts the careful balance we have maintained. Your technology advances too quickly, your population grows too fast, your ambitions reach too far. What exactly are you asking us to do? Rodriguez asked. Return to your birth system, the architect declared. Remain there until your species achieves sufficient wisdom to join galactic civilization properly. This process typically requires between 50 and 100,000 years. And if we refuse? The chamber fell silent except for the alien sounds of the different environmental systems. When the Swarm Queen finally spoke, her 1,000 voices carried an unmistakable threat. Then you will be contained by force. Your colonies will be destroyed, your ships disabled, your homeworld quarantined. If necessary, your species will be reduced to a level where it can no longer pose a threat to galactic stability. Rodriguez maintained her composure, but inside she was calculating how many human worlds lay within reach of hegemony forces. The answer was not encouraging. I need to consult with my government, she said. You have 1 standard galactic year to withdraw from all worlds beyond your origin system, the architect announced. After that time, we will begin enforcement actions. The meeting ended without ceremony, and Rodriguez found herself back aboard the Valkyrie with a message that would terrify Earth's leadership. Humanity faced a choice between voluntary confinement and forced extinction. During the return journey, Rodriguez received an encrypted message from Dr. Hughes back at the ancient station. His research had uncovered something important about the returned gods that changed everything. The genetic analysis is complete, the message read. The beings calling themselves gods aren't just enhanced humans. They're the result of multiple species combining their genetic material over millions of years. They started as human, but they incorporated DNA from dozens of other races they encountered. That's how they became so powerful. But here's the crucial part, the message continued. Some of the genetic markers match samples from hegemony species. The gods aren't just humanity's descendants. They're descendants of the same races that are now threatening us. Rodriguez stared at the message, understanding the implications. The hegemony's fear of humanity wasn't just about territorial expansion or resource competition. They were afraid that humans would follow the same path as the gods, evolving into something that could challenge their dominance. The elder races had faced the ancestors of the returned gods before, and they had no intention of facing their descendants again. The hegemony did not wait for their deadline to expire. 6 months after Commander Rodriguez returned to Earth with news of the ultimatum, hegemony forces struck 12 human frontier colonies simultaneously. The attacks came without warning, and with overwhelming force, General Paul Mitchell received the first distress calls at his command center on New Geneva, one of humanity's most important military outposts. The reports were almost identical across all 12 worlds. Massive ships appearing out of nowhere, defensive systems failing instantly, and colonists fleeing toward evacuation points that the enemy seemed to know about in advance. They're not trying to negotiate, Mitchell told Admiral Sarah Johnson during an emergency communication. This is extermination. They're targeting civilian centers, orbital platforms, everything. Sarah coordinated the defense from the Fleet Command vessel, UES Liberty, but humanity's conventional weapons proved almost useless against hegemony technology. Human plasma cannons bounced harmlessly off enemy shields. Human missiles were neutralized before they could reach their targets, and human ships were outmaneuvered by vessels that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. The worst part was the efficiency of the attack. The hegemony forces showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. They systematically destroyed everything humans had built and left the worlds uninhabitable for organic life. It was during the defense of New Sparta that everything changed. Lieutenant Dan Foster was piloting a standard fighter craft when his squadron encountered a group of architect vessels that had been methodically destroying the colony's agricultural domes. Dan's wingmen were shot down within minutes, leaving him alone against impossible odds. As his fighter systems failed around him, Don heard a voice in his head that sounded like thunder rolling across mountains. "Young warrior, will you accept the strength to protect your people?" Before Don could answer, his fighter was bathed in brilliant light that poured from the returned god station, which had somehow appeared in orbit around New Sparta. When the light faded, Dan's fighter had been transformed into something that barely resembled human technology. The new craft responded to his thoughts rather than his hands. Its weapons channeled energy drawn from the system's star, and its armor phased between dimensions to avoid enemy fire. Don found himself moving faster than he had ever thought possible, his reflexes enhanced beyond human limits. The battle against the architect ships became a dance of light and energy. Dan's enhanced fighter struck with the force of stellar fire, destroying enemy vessels that had seemed invincible moments before. But with each enemy he destroyed, Dan felt himself changing in ways that went beyond the physical. His perception of time slowed down, allowing him to process tactical information at superhuman speeds. His emotional responses became more controlled, more focused. Most disturbing of all, he began to understand the hegemony forces not as enemies to be defeated, but as variables in an equation to be solved. Dr. Nina Lopez, working aboard the gods station monitored Dan's transformation through advanced sensors that tracked both his physical and mental changes. What she discovered terrified her even as it offered hope for humanity's survival. "The God Tech isn't just providing enhanced equipment," she reported to the research team. "It's rewriting the user's genetic structure in real time." Don Foster is becoming something beyond baseline human, but he's still recognizably human in his core personality and values. The transformation technology spread quickly as more human forces came under attack. Captain Rick Stone led a unit of enhanced soldiers who could survive in vacuum, move faster than unaugmented humans could track, and fight with weapons that drew their power from quantum fluctuations. But the enhanced humans paid a price for their new abilities. They found it harder to relate to their unaugmented comrades, struggled with emotions that seemed primitive compared to their expanded awareness, and felt an increasing sense of isolation from the species they were fighting to protect. "We're becoming like them," Stone confided to his second-in-command during a quiet moment between battles. "The gods, more powerful but somehow less human." The war escalated as both sides deployed increasingly devastating weapons. The hegemony forces began using planet-killing devices that could strip away a world's atmosphere in hours. The enhanced humans responded with weapons that could destabilize stars or tear holes in spacetime itself. Civilian populations on both sides suffered as the conflict spread beyond military targets. Human colonies that had never seen combat found themselves evacuation zones as entire star systems became battlefields. Hegemony worlds that had known peace for millions of years were suddenly under attack from enhanced humans who fought with the fury of cornered animals and the power of gods. The turning point came during the Battle of Kepler Prime, where Admiral Johnson led a combined fleet of conventional and enhanced forces against the largest hegemony armada ever assembled. The battle raged for 3 days across 4 different star systems, with casualties mounting on both sides. It was there that the true nature of the God Tech revealed itself. The enhanced humans began working together in ways that transcended normal military coordination. They shared thoughts, experiences, and tactical awareness through connections that the technology had created between their modified minds. Dan Foster, now commanding a squadron of enhanced pilots, found himself linked to dozens of other enhanced humans across the battlefield. Together, they formed a collective intelligence that could outthink and outmaneuver the hegemony forces while still maintaining their individual personalities and free will. The hegemony fleet was defeated, but the victory came at a cost that made everyone question whether humanity was winning or losing the war. The enhanced humans were becoming something new, something that might not be human at all despite their origins. As the battle ended, General Mitchell stood in his command center and watched the enhanced soldiers returning from the front lines. They moved with perfect coordination, spoke in harmonies that suggested shared thoughts, and looked at their unaugmented comrades with expressions that mixed affection with something approaching pity. "We're saving humanity," Mitchell said to himself, "but are we destroying it at the same time?" The question haunted everyone who witnessed the transformation taking place among Earth's defenders. They were winning battles against impossible odds, but each victory brought them closer to becoming something that their ancestors might not recognize as human. Dr. Grace Turner had spent her career studying alien biology, but nothing had prepared her for the discovery she made in the deepest archives of the God Station. Hidden beneath layers of security that had taken months to penetrate, she found records that revealed the true history of the galaxy and the terrible cycle that had repeated itself for millions of years. The returned gods had not been the first species to achieve transcendence. The galaxy had seen the rise and fall of dozens of godlike civilizations, each following the same pattern. A young species would develop technology that allowed them to enhance themselves beyond their biological limitations. They would become powerful, immortal, and seemingly perfect. Then they would use that power to dominate every other species they encountered. The current hegemony races were once servants, Grace explained to President Emma Davis during a classified briefing. The architects built monuments for their godmasters. The swarm queens provided biological labor. The void touched served as messengers and scouts. But every god species eventually fell to the same weakness. What weakness? President Davis asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. They lost their humanity, for lack of a better word. They became so focused on perfection and efficiency that they stopped being able to connect with other forms of life. They ruled through power rather than wisdom, and eventually their subjects rebelled. Commander Tony Brooks had led a secret mission to recover additional archives from dead worlds throughout the galaxy. What his team found painted a picture of civilizations that had achieved everything they thought they wanted, only to discover that transcendence without wisdom led to emptiness and tyranny. Every god species eventually destroyed itself, Tony reported, not through war or disease, but through isolation. They became so advanced that they couldn't relate to anyone or anything. They lost the ability to feel joy, wonder, or love. In the end, they simply stopped caring about existence itself. The revelation explained the hegemony's desperate fear of humanity's potential ascension. They had lived through the cycle of divine tyranny and liberation multiple times. From their perspective, preventing the rise of new god species was a matter of survival for all organic life in the galaxy, but the war continued to escalate, and more humans were accepting enhancement to survive against hegemony forces. The enhanced humans were becoming increasingly powerful and increasingly isolated from their unaugmented relatives. Don Foster, now one of the most enhanced humans alive, could barely communicate with baseline humans without using technological interfaces. To slow his thoughts down to their level. I remember being human, Don told Dr. Lopez during one of their sessions. But it's like remembering a dream. I can recall the emotions and experiences, but I can't feel them anymore. Everything is so clear now, so logical. I understand the mathematical principles underlying emotions, but I don't experience them the same way. Dr. Lopez watched with growing concern as more enhanced humans reported similar changes. They were becoming more efficient, more rational, and more powerful. But they were also losing the spark of creativity and empathy that had always been humanity's greatest strength. The crisis came to a head when Captain Stone's enhanced unit was ordered to pacify a hegemony civilian population on a contested world. The mission was strategically sound, the targets were valid military objectives, and the enhanced soldiers carried out their orders with perfect efficiency. But when Stone filed his report, President Davis realized that the enhanced humans had shown no hesitation about targeting civilian infrastructure, no concern for collateral damage, and no emotional response to the suffering they had caused. They had become exactly what the hegemony feared, a species so transcendent that they had lost the ability to value life that was different from their own. "We're facing the Prometheus choice," President Davis announced to her cabinet. "We can give humanity the fire of the gods and save our species from extinction, but in doing so we may destroy everything that makes us human." The debate that followed was intense and desperate. Some argued that survival was more important than preserving human nature, that evolution always required sacrifice, and that the enhanced humans were still recognizably human in their core values. Others pointed out that the enhanced humans were already showing signs of the same disconnection that had plagued every previous god species. They were becoming rulers rather than protectors, seeing baseline humans as children who needed guidance rather than equals who deserved respect. The technology itself isn't evil, Dr. Lopez argued, but it creates a gap between enhanced and unenhanced that grows wider with each generation. Eventually, the enhanced will see the unenhanced as we might see insects, worthy of protection perhaps, but not truly equal. Admiral Johnson, who had commanded both enhanced and baseline forces, provided a military perspective that chilled everyone present. The enhanced humans don't take orders from unaugmented officers anymore. They listen politely and then do whatever they think is best. They're not rebelling exactly, but they're not really under our command either. President Davis faced the most difficult decision in human history. The hegemony forces were preparing for a final assault on Earth itself. Without massive deployment of godtech enhancement, humanity would face extinction within months. But widespread enhancement would create a new species that might be human in origin but would no longer be human in nature. There has to be a third option, she said finally. The gods said they were hoping we would show them a path they never found. Maybe that path isn't about choosing between humanity and transcendence. Maybe it's about finding a way to have both. Dr. Turner spoke up from her research station. According to the archives, no species has ever found that balance. Every attempt at partial enhancement has led to either stagnation or full transcendence. Then we'll be the first, President Davis declared. But we need to find an answer quickly. The enhanced humans are already losing touch with their unaugmented families and friends. If we wait much longer, they may decide that baseline humanity isn't worth saving. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the enormity of the challenge ahead. Humanity stood at the crossroads between extinction and transformation, and both paths seemed to lead to the death of everything they valued about their species. Outside the conference room windows, enhanced human soldiers patrolled the grounds. With movements too graceful and precise to be entirely human, they were humanity's protectors and perhaps its greatest threat, walking symbols of the choice that could not be delayed much longer. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the same chamber where he had first met the returned gods, but everything had changed. The war had been raging for 2 years, and Jake himself was no longer entirely human. Prolonged exposure to godtech had enhanced his capabilities without fully transforming him, leaving him caught between two states of existence. "You see the problem now," Allfather said, his ancient voice carrying sadness that spanned millennia. "Every species faces this choice, and every species chooses incorrectly. They either remain weak and face extinction, or become strong and lose their souls." Jake studied the holographic displays that showed the current state of the war. Humanity was winning individual battles but losing something far more important. The enhanced humans were becoming increasingly detached from their origins, while the baseline humans were becoming increasingly dependent on their enhanced protectors. What if the choice itself is wrong? Jake asked. What if we don't have to choose between remaining human and becoming gods? Dr. Lisa Kim, who had been studying the ancient transmissions that started everything, looked up from her research station. Her analysis of the original signals had revealed something that everyone had missed during the first contact. The signals weren't just broadcasting to us, she said. They were broadcasting to multiple species throughout the galaxy. I've been analyzing the transmission patterns, and I think the gods have been trying to solve this problem for a very long time. Thor stepped forward, his enhanced form radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. We have watched 17 species face this choice. 12 chose transformation and became tyrants. 5 chose to remain unchanged and were destroyed. By their enemies or by us when we were still conquerors. But there's something different about the current situation, Athena added. This is the first time the choice has been made while the previous god species still existed to observe and guide. Jake felt a spark of inspiration, the kind of creative leap that baseline humans made instinctively but enhanced humans had to calculate. What if that's the answer? Not individual transcendence, but cooperation between different levels of development? Engineer Maria Santos, who had been working with both human and god technology, suddenly understood what Jake was suggesting. Synthesis instead of replacement. The enhanced humans need the creativity and emotional depth of baseline humans, while baseline humans need the protection and capabilities of the enhanced. That would require unprecedented cooperation, Allfather warned. Every previous attempt at such partnerships has failed because the enhanced beings eventually saw their unenhanced companions as burdens or obstacles. Then we make sure that doesn't happen, Jake said firmly. We design the technology to require cooperation instead of enabling domination. The solution they developed over the following months was unlike anything attempted before. Instead of individual enhancement that isolated people from their communities, they created interconnected systems that enhanced groups while maintaining individual identity, the new technology required baseline humans and enhanced humans to work together to achieve maximum effectiveness. Enhanced humans provided processing power and physical capabilities, while baseline humans provided creativity, emotional intelligence, and the spark of innovation that kept the partnership dynamic rather than static. Dr. Nina Lopez worked with volunteers from both enhanced and baseline populations to test the cooperative systems. The results were promising but challenging. Enhanced humans had to learn to value perspectives they could analyze but not fully understand, while baseline humans had to learn to contribute meaningfully to projects that operated beyond their individual comprehension. The first major test came during the Battle of Terra Nova, where a combined hegemony fleet attempted to destroy one of humanity's most important colonies. The defense was coordinated by mixed teams of enhanced and baseline humans working through the new, cooperative technology. Captain Rick Stone, now serving as a liaison between enhanced and baseline forces, watched in amazement as the hybrid system proved more effective than either pure enhancement or pure baseline capability. The enhanced humans provided tactical analysis and combat effectiveness, while the baseline humans provided strategic creativity and the ability to adapt to unexpected situations. The hegemony forces, expecting to face either primitive humans or transcendent gods, were unprepared for something that was simultaneously both and neither. The human defense adapted faster than the enemy could analyze, fought with more creativity than pure logic could predict, and maintained the moral principles that prevented them from becoming the tyrants that the hegemony feared. But the real breakthrough came when moderate factions within the hegemony itself began to take notice. Commander Lisa Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, received an unexpected communication from a group of hegemony leaders who had grown tired of the endless cycle of war and transcendence. "Your species has done something we thought impossible," the message read. "You have found a way to grow in power without losing your essential nature. Some among us believe this offers hope for breaking the cycle that has trapped the galaxy for millions of years." The subsequent negotiations were delicate and complex, involving not just humans and the traditional hegemony species, but also a faction of the returned gods who had grown weary of their isolation. Thor and a group of like-minded enhanced beings volunteered to undergo a process that would partially reverse their transcendence, trading some of their godlike power for the ability to reconnect with organic life. The final confrontation took place at the galactic core, where extremist factions from all sides had gathered for a decisive battle. Admiral Chris Taylor led a fleet that included traditional human ships, enhanced vessels, cooperative hybrid craft, and even some hegemony ships crewed by beings who had chosen to join the new alliance. The battle was won not through superior firepower, but through something that the galaxy had not seen for millions of years: genuine cooperation between species that had evolved along different paths. Enhanced humans worked alongside baseline humans, reformed hegemony species contributed their ancient wisdom, and even some of the returned gods participated as advisors rather than rulers. When the extremist forces were defeated, the galaxy faced a new reality. The cycle of transcendence and tyranny had been broken, replaced by a model of cooperative enhancement that preserved individual identity while enabling collective growth. Jake Morrison, now serving as humanity's representative to the new galactic covenant, stood on the observation deck of the joint station that had been built to coordinate cooperation between all member species. Through the transparent walls, he could see ships from dozens of different civilizations, working together on projects that no single species could have accomplished alone. Children from Earth visited the station regularly, part of an exchange program that ensured future generations would grow up understanding that diversity of thought and capability was a strength rather than a weakness. They played games with young architects whose crystal bodies chimed with musical laughter, learned mathematics from swarm queen juveniles whose collective intelligence made learning a shared experience, and listened to stories told by void-touched elders whose energy forms painted pictures directly in their minds. The returned gods had chosen to remain as advisors and teachers rather than rulers. helping guide humanity's continued development while respecting their descendants' right to choose their own path. Some, like Thor, had chosen partial reversion to reconnect with the emotions and experiences they had lost. Others, like Athena, maintained their transcendent state but focused their enhanced capabilities on fostering wisdom rather than accumulating power. The galaxy had entered a new age where transcendence and humanity could coexist, where growth did not require the abandonment of core values, and where the ancient cycle of gods and servants had been replaced by partnerships between equals, who happened to exist at different levels of development. As Jake watched the stars through the station's observation ports, he reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this point. They had faced extinction and transcendence, war and peace, the choice between remaining human and becoming something greater. In the end, they had found a way to become more than human without ceasing to be human at all. The universe was vast and full of challenges yet to be discovered, but for the first time in galactic history, the younger species would face those challenges not as potential victims or future tyrants, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, the endless quest to grow and learn while remaining true to the values that made existence meaningful.